March 17, 1943. 11:42 p.m., mid-Atlantic, approximately 600 miles south of Iceland. U-boat 384, a Type VIIC submarine, under the command of Kapitänleutnant Hans-Joachim von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski, surfaces to recharge batteries and transmit a routine situation report. The message is brief, encrypted, transmitted in a burst lasting less than 30 seconds. But the content of that message, decoded later from captured German naval archives, contains a sentence that reveals the exact moment when Germany's submarine commanders realized they had lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The sentence read, "Contact with convoy, HX-229. Enemy escort strength estimated at minimum 12 destroyers, 8 corvettes, 4 frigates, continuous air cover. Our tactical position is hopeless. Requesting permission to withdraw. They have too many ships, we have no chance." 3 hours later, U-boat 384 was detected by radar, depth charged by HMS Volunteer and sunk with all hands volunteer. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski's final message was one of dozens transmitted during March 1943, all containing variations of the same desperate realization. The Allies hadn't just matched German U-boat production. They had buried it under an avalanche of escort ships, aircraft, and detection technology that made submarine warfare mathematically impossible. By May 1943, German Naval Intelligence compiled the numbers, and what they found was so shocking that Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, initially refused to believe the reports. The Allies had deployed approximately 2,700 escort vessels to the Atlantic. Destroyers, corvettes, frigates, destroyer escorts, sloops, and armed trawlers, all hunting fewer than 200 operational German U-boats. That's a ratio of more than 13 escort ships for every German submarine. And that number did not even include the hundreds of Allied aircraft now patrolling the Atlantic with radar, depth charges, and acoustic homing torpedoes. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. German U-boat warfare had become a suicide mission, and the story of how the Allies achieved this crushing numerical superiority reveals a lesson in industrial mobilization and strategic economics that changed naval warfare forever. Let me take you back to where Germany's submarine campaign started. 1939 to 1941. The happy time for U-boat commanders. During this period, German submarines operated with devastating effectiveness. Allied merchant shipping losses were catastrophic. In 1940 alone, U-boats sank over 2.5 million tons of Allied shipping. In 1941, that number climbed to 3.2 million tons. The Allies were losing ships faster than they could build them. Britain was on the edge of starvation. The convoy system existed, but escort ships were desperately scarce. A typical convoy in 1941 might have 40 merchant ships protected by 3 or 4 escorts. Sometimes only 2, sometimes 1. For U-boat commanders, it was a target-rich environment. Wolf pack tactics allowed multiple submarines to converge on convoys, overwhelm the thin escort screen, and slaughter merchant ships. U-boat aces like Otto Kretschmer, Gunther Prien, and Joachim Schepke became legends, sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of shipping. German propaganda celebrated the U-boat arm as the weapon that would starve Britain into surrender. And for a brief, terrifying period, they were right. Britain's survival hung by a thread. But here is what the Germans failed to anticipate. Here is the strategic miscalculation that would cost them the entire battle. The Allies were not just building merchant ships to replace losses. They were building escort ships. Lots of escort ships. And they were building them using a mass production philosophy that the German Navy never matched. Let me show you what Allied escort ship production looked like. The British developed the Flower-class corvette, a small, simple escort vessel designed for one purpose: hunt submarines. The corvette was not fast. It was not glamorous. It was cramped, uncomfortable, and rolled viciously in heavy seas. Crews called them the ships that would roll on wet grass. But the Flower-class corvette was cheap, simple, and fast to build. A single shipyard could construct a corvette in approximately 4 to 6 months. And because the design used mostly commercial shipbuilding techniques, Britain could build them in shipyards that had never constructed a warship before. Between 1940 and 1944, British and Canadian shipyards built 294 Flower-class corvettes. That is one corvette every 5 days for 4 straight years. But the corvettes were just the beginning. The British also developed the River-class frigate, a slightly larger and more capable escort ship. They built 151 of those. Then came the Castle-class corvettes, improved versions with better endurance and armament. They built 44 of those, and the Colony-class frigates, designed for mass production in Canadian shipyards. They built dozens more. But the real escort ship production miracle happened in the United States. In 1941, the United States Navy did not even have a dedicated escort ship design. American destroyers were large, expensive, and took over a year to build. The Navy needed something simpler, cheaper, and faster to produce. So American naval architects designed the destroyer Escort, a ship smaller than a full destroyer but larger than a corvette, purpose-built for anti-submarine warfare. And then American shipyards started building them in quantities that defied belief. Between 1943 and 1945, American shipyards built 563 destroyer Escorts. That's more than one every 2 days. And they did it using the same mass production techniques that Henry Kaiser had pioneered with Liberty ships: prefabricated sections, welded construction instead of riveting, assembly line methods applied to warship construction. Some destroyer escorts went from keel laying to commissioning in less than 3 months. The fastest DE-339 was built in 36 days, 5 weeks from raw steel to a fully operational warship. Now add the British escort carriers, small aircraft carriers designed to provide air cover for convoys. The Americans built 122 of those, and the British sloops, older escort designs brought out of reserve and updated, and the armed trawlers, civilian fishing vessels converted to submarine hunters. By mid-1943, the Allies were adding more than 100 new escort vessels to the Atlantic every single month. The Germans, at their absolute peak production, were building approximately 25 U-boats per month. The Allies were building 4 times as many submarine hunters as the Germans were building submarines. But sheer numbers were not the whole story. The escort ships of 1943 were not the same ships that had struggled in 1941. They had been upgraded with technology that turned submarine hunting from an art into a science. Every modern escort ship carried radar. Centimetric radar that could detect a surface submarine at ranges of up to 10 miles. In darkness, in fog, in conditions where U-boats had once been invisible. The Germans had no effective counter to Allied radar. Their submarines were designed to operate on the surface at night, charging batteries and transiting at high speed. Radar made nighttime surface operations suicidal. Every modern escort ship also carried sonar. Not the primitive sonar of 1940, but improved SDIC systems that could detect submerged submarines at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. And the escorts carried Hedgehog and Squid anti-submarine mortars, weapons that fired patterns of small bombs ahead of the ship, allowing escorts to attack without losing sonar contact. The old method of depth charge attacks required the escort to pass over the submarine, losing sonar contact at the critical moment. Hedgehog allowed continuous tracking and attack. U-boat survival rates plummeted. And then there were the escort carriers. Small aircraft carriers that sailed with convoys, providing continuous air cover. Each escort carrier carried approximately 20 aircraft, usually a mix of fighters and anti-submarine patrol planes. These aircraft could spot surfaced U-boats from miles away, force them to dive, and guide escort ships to the contact. And they carried depth charges and acoustic homing torpedoes that could kill submarines from the air. By mid-1943, there was no safe zone in the Atlantic. U-boats could not surface by day because of aircraft. They could not surface by night because of radar. And they could not stay submerged indefinitely because their battery capacity was limited. Let me show you what this looked like from a U-boat commander's perspective. You are in command of U-571, operating in the North Atlantic in May 1943. Your mission is to intercept convoy ONS-5, a slow convoy heading from Britain to North America. Intelligence reports suggest 42 merchant ships. You are part of a wolf pack. 15 U-boats coordinating their attack. In 1941, this would have been a massacre. 15 submarines against a handful of escorts. But this is 1943. You approach the convoy at night, running on the surface to get into attack position. Suddenly, your radar detector screams. An enemy aircraft has detected you. You crash, dive. The aircraft drops depth charges. They miss, but you are now submerged, burning battery power, unable to keep up with the convoy. You surface 3 hours later, trying to regain contact. Within minutes, your radar detector screams again. Another aircraft. You dive again. This pattern repeats throughout the night. You never get close enough to the convoy to fire a torpedo. By dawn, you have burned through most of your battery power and have not even seen the convoy. You stay submerged during daylight, creeping slowly forward. As night falls again, you surface and transmit a situation report. 12 of the 15 U-boats in your wolf pack report the same experience: continuous air harassment and radar-equipped escorts. It is impossible to close to torpedo range. 3 U-boats have been sunk. You have achieved 0 merchant ship kills. And then, just after you finish transmitting, a destroyer appears out of the darkness, its radar having detected your transmission. You crash dive for the last time. 56 depth charges later, U-571 is on the bottom of the Atlantic. This scenario played out hundreds of times in 1943, the Black May, as German submariners called it. In May 1943 alone, Germany lost 43 U-boats. That is more than 1 U-boat every single day. And the merchant ship sinks, dropping. In May 1943, U-boats sank 58 merchant ships. In a typical month in 1941, they had sunk over 100. The exchange rate had reversed catastrophically. The Allies were losing fewer ships while sinking more submarines. The mathematics of attrition had flipped completely. Admiral Dönitz looked at the numbers and realized the truth that von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski had transmitted in his final message. The Allies had too many ships. They had too many aircraft. They had technology that made submarine operations nearly impossible. And they were building more escort ships every month. On May 24, 1943, Dönitz made the decision that effectively ended Germany's submarine campaign. He ordered all U-boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic was not over, but Germany had lost the initiative. They would never regain it. But here is the part that reveals the true depth of Allied industrial dominance. The Germans did not give up. They kept building U-boats. They developed new technologies, snorkel-breathing tubes that allowed submarines to run diesel engines while submerged, acoustic torpedoes that homed in on the sound of escort ship propellers, improved battery systems, new submarine designs like the Type 21, a revolutionary high-speed submarine that could outrun escorts while submerged. But none of it mattered, because the Allies kept building more escort ships. By the end of 1943, the Allies had over 3,000 escort vessels in the Atlantic. By mid-1944, that number had grown to over 3,500. The ratio of escorts to U-boats had grown to more than 17-1. Every German submarine that left port faced an ocean saturated with hunters. The life expectancy of a U-boat crew had dropped from months to weeks. Of the approximately 1,150 U-boats commissioned during World War II, 785 were sunk. That is a loss rate of 68%. Of the roughly 40,000 men who served in the U-boat force, approximately 28,000 were killed. That is a casualty rate of 70%, the highest of any branch of service in any military during World War II. Let me show you the strategic economics that the Germans never overcame. A 6C U-boat, the standard German submarine, cost approximately 4.5 million Reichsmarks to build. That is roughly 1.8 million in 1943 dollars. The submarine required specialized shipyards, precision engineering, and months of construction time. A British Flower-class corvette cost approximately 90,000, about 360,000 in 1943 dollars. That's 1/5 the cost of a U-boat. An American destroyer Escort cost approximately 6 million. But the United States was building them at a rate that completely overwhelmed German submarine production. The strategic exchange rate was devastating. The Allies could afford to lose 3 or 4 escort ships for every U-boat sunk and still come out ahead economically. But the actual exchange rate was far worse for Germany. In 1943, the Allies lost fewer than 50 escort vessels to submarine attack. They sank over 200 U-boats. The exchange rate was 4-1 in favor of the Allies, and each U-boat carried a crew of 44 highly trained men who took months to replace it. Each escort ship carried a crew of 100 to 200 sailors, but the Allies had the manpower to crew every ship they built. Germany did not. Here's what I find most devastating about this story. The German submariners knew they were losing. The commanders knew the mathematics were impossible. But they kept going out. They kept fighting. Because orders were orders. Because they believed in their duty. Because they hoped that new technology or new tactics would change the equation. U-boat crews in 1944 and 1945 sailed knowing they probably would not return, and most of them did not. The bravery is undeniable, but the waste is staggering. Thousands of skilled men sent to die in a campaign that had been mathematically unwinnable since mid-1943. Let's talk about the moment that the German Naval High Command finally accepted the truth. Late 1943, Dönitz presented Hitler with an analysis of submarine operations. The conclusion was inescapable. Germany could not build U-boats faster than the Allies could build escort ships. Germany could not sink merchant ships faster than the Allies could build replacements. And Germany could not sustain the casualty rates in the U-boat force without collapsing morale completely. Dönitz recommended shifting submarine construction to defensive operations, coastal defense, protecting Germany's own shipping. Hitler refused. He ordered continued U-boat production and deployment. And thousands more submariners died in a campaign that everyone with access to the numbers knew was already lost. The final statistics tell the story. From 1939 to 1945, German U-boats sank approximately 2,800 Allied merchant ships, totaling 14.5 million tons. That's an enormous amount of destruction. But the Allies built over 42 million tons of new merchant shipping during the same period. For every ship the U-boats sank, the Allies launched 3 more. And they did it while simultaneously building the 3,500 escort ships that hunted the submarines into extinction. The industrial capacity differential was so vast that Germany never had a realistic chance of winning the Battle of the Atlantic. They just didn't realize it until 1943. Here's the broader lesson that goes beyond World War II. In modern warfare, industrial capacity matters more than tactical brilliance. The Germans had excellent submarine designs, highly trained crews, and innovative tactics, but the Allies had shipyards that could build escort vessels faster than Germany could build submarines. And in a war of attrition, production capacity is destiny. You can have the best weapons in the world, but if your enemy can build 10 times as many good enough weapons, you lose. Every time. The U-boat campaign is the story of a technologically sophisticated, tactically brilliant force that was simply overwhelmed by an enemy with superior industrial resources. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski's final message, "They have too many ships, we have no chance," was the moment of realization. The moment when tactical excellence met industrial reality and lost. And that's a lesson that every military planner should understand. Technology and tactics matter, but production capacity and resource mobilization matter more. So here is my question for you. Knowing what you now know about the industrial mathematics of the Battle of the Atlantic, do you think Germany ever had a realistic chance of winning the submarine campaign? Or was it always a matter of time before Allied production overwhelmed German tactical advantages? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I want to see this debate. If this changed how you understand the Battle of the Atlantic, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that shows you why industrial capacity wins wars. Thanks for watching.